It was a crisp morning at Cedarwood High School, the kind of morning where the sunlight filters lazily through the tall windows of the main hallway, casting long golden beams across the lockers. The chatter of students bounced off the tile floors, laughter and gossip blending into a chaotic symphony that could make even the most confident teenager nervous. For Jasmine Carter, a 16-year-old girl with striking, dark skin and eyes that reflected quiet intelligence, today was more than just the start of a new school year. It was a test of courage she hadn't fully anticipated. Walking through the crowded hall, Jasmine adjusted the strap of her backpack, her palms slightly damp. She could feel the gazes of dozens of students drifting toward her, some curious, some skeptical, and others judgmental. Whispers tickled the edges of her ears. "Who's the new girl? She's so different. Does she even belong here?" For a moment the chatter threatened to sink her confidence, but Jasmine had long since learned that strength often hides behind a calm exterior. She drew in a deep breath, straightened her posture, and stepped forward with quiet resolve. Her new school was a sprawling building of red bricks and glass windows, a place where social hierarchies were rigid and first impressions lasted longer than anyone would admit. The lockers were tall, metallic, and gleaming, each a canvas for the personal stickers and graffiti of the students who had been here for years. As Jasmine walked, her eyes scanned the hallway, taking in the familiar chaos of teenage life. Friends whispering secrets in corners, a teacher rushing to the classroom, and the distant shriek of a basketball bouncing down the gym corridor. It didn't take long for the first hint of hostility to surface. Kayla and Tiffany, two senior girls infamous for their cruelty, spotted her immediately. Kayla, tall with blonde hair cascading in perfect waves, leaned into Tiffany, whose dark hair framed her smirking face. "Look at her," Kayla whispered, her tone dripping with amusement. "Think she's going to survive the first day?" Tiffany snorted, rolling her eyes. Jasmine felt the tension coiling in her stomach like a spring. The hall seemed to narrow, and for a fleeting second she considered turning back. But she didn't. Not today. With each step, Jasmine reminded herself why she was here. She wasn't just a new student. She was a thinker, a dreamer, someone whose ideas had already changed projects back at her old school. She wanted to carve a space here to prove that intelligence and kindness could not only survive but thrive even in the midst of judgment and ridicule. The whispers around her grew louder. A group of students huddled near the lockers, their eyes following her every movement. She could hear fragments of conversation. "Did you see her backpack? She's new, probably from some weird neighborhood." Jasmine's jaw tightened and a spark of determination lit her eyes. She had encountered doubt before, prejudice before, and today would not be different. She would navigate these social waters carefully but firmly. Despite the nerves gnawing at her, Jasmine noticed subtle details about the hallway that others seemed oblivious to. The hallway's gleaming tile reflected her steps in a distorted mirror, almost doubling the number of her cautious movements. Posters for the upcoming science fair hung above the lockers, each one vibrant with hand-drawn experiments and enthusiastic messages. Jasmine felt a small thrill. Science had always been her refuge, her sanctuary, a place where curiosity mattered more than conformity. Perhaps this was where she would find her footing, where her brilliance could shine, despite the shadows of gossip and mockery. A sudden shove startled her. Nothing aggressive, but enough to make her stumble slightly. A pair of students had accidentally brushed past her, muttering apologies, but the moment's tension felt magnified by the constant scrutiny she felt. Jasmine's breath quickened, but she steadied herself. This hallway, with its laughter, whispers, and subtle judgments, was her battlefield now. She would walk it with her head held high, even if every eye in the school tried to tear her confidence apart. Her first class was science, and the thought of entering a room where her skills mattered more than appearances brought her a measure of comfort. She reminded herself that each step forward was a victory over the invisible barriers the bullies and skeptical classmates had already erected. The hallway stretched ahead, full of potential danger and opportunity alike. Jasmine adjusted her backpack straps again, straightened her shoulders, and walked toward her classroom. As she passed a group of students clustered by the lockers, she caught snippets of conversation that made her pulse quicken. "She doesn't look like she'll last a week. I bet she cries by lunch." Jasmine felt the familiar sting of unfair judgment, but beneath it a deep sense of resolve began to grow. She would not allow these whispers to define her. Instead, she would let her actions, her intelligence, and her creativity speak for her. And as the classroom doors loomed ahead, Jasmine took one last deep breath, thinking of the science fair posters, the challenges ahead, and the opportunity to show her true self. She would not just survive at Cedarwood High, she would thrive. And one day those who mocked her would regret ever underestimating her. The hallway seemed to shrink as Jasmine's steps carried her further into the social labyrinth of Cedarwood High. Her heartbeat was steady, but her senses were sharp, picking up every whisper, every glance, every subtle movement of the crowd around her. It was then that she first noticed Kayla and Tiffany, two of the school's most notorious figures, looming like predatory birds among the sea of teenage faces. Their presence radiated confidence mixed with cruelty, a combination that made even the most self-assured students pause. Jasmine, however, refused to let intimidation dictate her actions. Kayla, tall and striking with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smug expression, leaned toward Tiffany, who had long dark hair cascading over her shoulders, eyes glinting with mischief. "Well, the new girl," Kayla whispered, her tone a mixture of mockery and curiosity. "Think she's going to survive the first week?" Tiffany let out a short, sharp laugh, shaking her head. Jasmine could feel their eyes piercing her, as if attempting to decode every detail of her appearance. The way she carried herself, the subtle determination in her gaze, the slight tremor in her hands. Jasmine's mind raced. She had been through judgment before, but the intensity here was different. This was a high school ecosystem where reputations were built on fear, laughter, and social manipulation. The crowd around the bullies seemed to defer to them, automatically, whispering quietly, sharing glances, laughing softly in their wake. And yet Jasmine refused to shrink. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "Strength isn't loud, Jasmine. It's quiet, patient, and unyielding." As she continued her cautious walk, Kayla's elbow brushed against a locker with a subtle nudge toward Jasmine, not enough to hurt, but enough to send a small jolt through her body. "Oops," Kayla said, feigning innocence, a sly smile tugging at her lips. Tiffany stifled a laugh, clearly pleased with the small display of intimidation. Jasmine's stomach twisted momentarily, but she straightened immediately, meeting their eyes with quiet defiance. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her falter. The whispers around her swelled, carrying fragments of conversation that made her chest tighten. "Did you see her backpack? Looks cheap. She probably doesn't even know anyone here. I bet she cries by lunch." Jasmine swallowed hard, but beneath the surface determination began to bubble. These were mere distractions, obstacles meant to test her resilience. Her true strength, she reminded herself, would not be in retaliation. It would be in brilliance, patience, and strategy. Every detail in the hallway felt magnified. The lockers, once mere storage units, now loomed like silent witnesses to the daily dramas of teenagers. The flickering fluorescent lights above cast uneven shadows on the linoleum floor, creating shifting patterns that seemed almost symbolic of the social terrain Jasmine had to navigate. Students passed by in hurried clicks, their shoes squeaking softly on polished tiles, their laughter echoing off the walls. It was a familiar symphony of chaos, yet Jasmine felt a strange clarity amidst it. Kayla and Tiffany continued their whispering, pointing subtly in Jasmine's direction. She could sense their attempts to rally others to create a wave of mockery that might isolate her completely. Yet Jasmine noticed something else. A few students were watching silently, curiosity written plainly on their faces. Not everyone was willing to participate in the cruelty. Some, she realized, were merely spectators waiting to see how this newcomer would respond. And Jasmine had no intention of disappointing them. Her eyes scanned the environment quickly. There was a poster for the upcoming science fair on the far wall, bright and colorful, promising opportunity and recognition for those brave enough to enter. Jasmine felt a flicker of hope. Here was a realm where intelligence mattered more than popularity, a place where she could demonstrate her worth without the interference of gossip or intimidation. Perhaps she thought this was her battlefield, and her triumph could serve as both proof of her capability and a quiet rebuke to those who doubted her. Then, almost imperceptibly, Kayla shoved a locker door toward Jasmine again, this time slightly more forcefully. It rattled against the metal and produced a sharp metallic clang. A small group of students nearby turned to watch, some curious, some amused. Jasmine's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from awareness. She knew she had a choice. React with anger, with tears, or with strategy. Anger would only play into their hands. Tears might validate their assumptions. Instead, she chose composure. With a subtle tilt of her chin, she avoided confrontation, keeping her eyes forward, walking past the bullies with measured confidence. The whispers continued, more insistent now yet. Jasmine felt an unfamiliar clarity. Each step was deliberate, each breath controlled. She had survived judgment before, but this was different. The stakes were higher, the audience larger. And though the bullies had set the stage for embarrassment, she had already begun to plot her path forward, not through confrontation but through intellect, creativity, and subtle, undeniable triumph. As she reached the corner of the hallway, Jasmine cast one last glance over her shoulder. Kayla and Tiffany were still smirking, their confidence seemingly unshaken. But Jasmine could see cracks. Tiffany's smirk faltered slightly as Jasmine's calm, unwavering gaze met hers. For a brief moment, Jasmine felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. The first encounter was over, but the story had only just begun. She would find a way to turn their mockery into a lesson in resilience, strategy, and brilliance. The bell rang in the distance, echoing through the hallways, signaling the beginning of classes. Students scurried to their respective rooms, the cacophony fading slightly as doors closed behind them. Jasmine took a deep breath, her mind already shifting towards science class, where her talents could shine unimpeded by gossip or cruelty. She had faced the bullies' first move and had emerged unbroken, her spirit intact, her resolve stronger than ever. And deep down, she knew that this was just the beginning, the first act in a story that would one day leave those who mocked her regretting their cruelty. Jasmine Carter entered the science classroom with a mixture of nerves and quiet anticipation. The scent of chalk chemicals and polished wooden desks filled the air, a familiar blend that reminded her of the countless hours she had spent experimenting, analyzing, and problem-solving at her previous school. Cedarwood High's science room was expansive, with long tables, neatly arranged shelves lined with glass beakers, test tubes, and periodic tables adorning the walls. Sunlight poured through tall windows, illuminating the room in golden hues and casting soft reflections across the polished surfaces. As she took her seat near the front, Jasmine scanned her surroundings. Students chatted quietly, organizing their notebooks and lab equipment, some casting curious glances toward the new girl. Jasmine's eyes, sharp and observant, caught every detail. The chalk smudge on one student's sleeve, the subtle flicker of nervous excitement in another's expression, the quiet smirk of Kayla and Tiffany sitting at the back already plotting, the subtle undermining of her presence. Yet Jasmine's focus remained unshaken. Today was not just another class. It was an opportunity to show that intellect and determination mattered far more than popularity or intimidation. The teacher, Mr. Williams, entered the room with a warm smile, his presence commanding attention without ever raising his voice. Mid-40s, glasses perched on his nose, hair slightly graying at the temples, he had an aura of patience and encouragement that put even the most anxious students at ease. "Good morning, class," he began, his voice calm yet vibrant. "Today we'll be tackling an advanced problem on kinetic energy and molecular motion. I want you to show me not just that you can solve it, but that you understand the principles behind it." As Mr. Williams wrote the problem on the chalkboard, Jasmine's mind began to race, not with anxiety, but with calculation and strategy. Her fingers itched to grab the chalk to demonstrate not only her comprehension of the complex principles, but also the analytical thinking that had earned her accolades at her previous school's science fair. She had always been the quiet observer, the one who let her results speak for themselves, and today would be no different. The murmurs in the classroom faded as Mr. Williams outlined the problem. The question involved multiple variables, the kind of multi-step challenge that required both conceptual understanding and careful calculation. Most students hesitated, their eyes darting between the board and their notes, whispers of confusion rippling quietly through the room. Kayla and Tiffany exchanged glances, their smirks indicating a mixture of boredom and superiority. They seemed confident that Jasmine, the new girl, would falter, that her first real test at Cedarwood High would reveal her to be ordinary. Jasmine, however, felt a surge of calm determination. She raised her hand, and when Mr. Williams nodded, she stepped to the board with measured steps. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. Chalk in hand, she began to work methodically, explaining her reasoning as she went. If we consider the kinetic energy of the system, we can apply the formula Ke equals to 1 to 2 mv2, but we must also account for frictional forces that may affect the outcome. By isolating the variables and calculating step by step, her voice was steady, precise, and confident. Students turned their heads, some leaning forward in awe, others whispering softly among themselves. Even Kayla's smirk faltered slightly, Tiffany's eyes narrowing as Jasmine's clarity and poise became undeniable. Mr. Williams watched intently, nodding with genuine admiration as she completed the multi-step solution flawlessly. The equations were correct, the explanation insightful, and her approach logical yet creative. It was more than just solving a problem. It was a display of mastery, a quiet assertion that intelligence and patience could command respect without raising a voice. A ripple of whispers spread through the classroom. "Wow, she actually knows what she's doing." "I didn't expect that from the new girl." Jasmine's pulse remained steady, but inside a subtle thrill coursed through her veins. This was more than academic success. It was validation, the first sign that her abilities could carve a place for her. Even in the midst of ridicule and doubt, Hill and Tiffany exchanged panicked glances, their initial confidence wavering. They had expected hesitation, nervous stumbles, perhaps even a small cry of frustration. Instead, they witnessed precision, intellect, and poise, all wrapped in the calm exterior of a girl they had assumed would be an easy target. Jasmine returned to her seat, chalk in hand, a quiet smile of satisfaction tugging at her lips. She had passed the first real test, not just of science but of perception and reputation. Mr. Williams, smiling warmly, addressed the class. "Excellent work, Jasmine. That is a brilliant and thorough approach. I encourage everyone to take note of the clarity and logical reasoning she demonstrated. This is precisely the kind of analytical thinking we hope to cultivate in every student." His words echoed through the room, both a commendation and an invitation. The students absorbed the praise in silence, some impressed, some envious, and some quietly plotting their next move. Jasmine's mind, however, was already shifting forward. The science fair loomed ahead, a perfect opportunity to further demonstrate her capabilities and turn the whispers of doubt into admiration. She understood that today's display of talent was only the first step in a longer journey, one that required not only intelligence but strategic thinking, resilience, and the ability to navigate a social environment fraught with subtle hostility. She felt the faint thrill of anticipation. By the end of class, Jasmine had not only solved the problem, but had also earned the first quiet respect of her peers, a recognition of her capabilities that even the bullies could not entirely ignore. Kayla and Tiffany, though outwardly composed, now faced an unsettling realization. Jasmine Carter was not the fragile newcomer they had anticipated. She was a force, a quiet intellect, that could not be shaken by mockery or intimidation. As the bell rang and students shuffled toward the next class, Jasmine gathered her belongings with a sense of quiet triumph. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. The bullies would not give up so quickly, and whispers of doubt would continue to echo. Yet today had proven one critical fact. Intelligence, poise, and determination could carve a space even in a world eager to belittle difference. And Jasmine, walking confidently toward the hallway, had begun to stake her claim not through confrontation, but through mastery, strategy, and undeniable talent. The lunchroom at Cedarwood High buzzed with energy, a cacophony of clattering trays, laughter, and murmured conversations. The smell of cafeteria food, pizza sandwiches, and the faint tang of disinfectant mingled in the air, creating a familiar yet chaotic atmosphere. Students crowded around tables, some seated in cliques, others seeking a spot in the bustling room. For Jasmine Carter, the new girl, this was yet another social gauntlet. Carrying her tray carefully, Jasmine scanned the room for a place to sit. Most tables were occupied clusters of students laughing and whispering in their tightly knit groups. She felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the quiet anxiety of being observed, judged, and sometimes dismissed before anyone truly knew her. Yet today something had shifted. Her earlier success in science class, her poised handling of the chalkboard problem, had infused her with a subtle confidence. She knew she had intelligence and resilience on her side. But social challenges were different from academic ones. Whispers, rumors, and sly looks could sting in ways that equations never could. Across the room, Kayla and Tiffany had claimed their usual table strategically, positioned near the center to maximize visibility and influence. They had noticed Jasmine enter and had already begun their subtle campaign. Kayla leaned toward Tiffany, whispering just enough for Jasmine to hear fragments. "She thinks she's so smart, doesn't she?" Kayla said, smirking. "Let's see if she can survive being alone here." Tiffany giggled softly, her dark eyes glinting with mischievous anticipation. "I've got a few ideas," she replied, "and they're going to love it." Jasmine carried her tray to a vacant seat at the edge of the room where a few other students were eating quietly. She tried to focus on the comforting rhythm of her breathing to drown out the undercurrent of ridicule directed at her, but the whispers followed her like shadows. "Who even is she? I heard she's from somewhere weird." Does she even know anyone here? Each phrase carried the weight of social judgment, the subtle cruelty of those who sought to dominate through gossip rather than confrontation. Despite the sting, Jasmine maintained her composure. Her fingers tightened slightly around the tray, but she didn't flinch, didn't scowl, didn't offer the bullies the reaction they craved. Instead, she settled at her seat, placing her tray down with deliberate calm. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the chatter, the laughter, the occasional glance of curiosity from other students. Not everyone was willing to participate in the bullying. Some were mere observers, silently noting the dynamics of the cafeteria with quiet curiosity. And Jasmine recognized this. Every eye in the room was a potential ally. Every glance a potential challenge. But she would not let the current of gossip dictate her. Self-worth, Kayla and Tiffany's. Campaign escalated subtly but efficiently. They began whispering louder, pointing occasionally in Jasmine's direction, ensuring that their ridicule would not go unnoticed. "Look at her," Kayla said, tilting her head toward Jasmine. "She's all alone. Don't you think it's sad?" Tiffany added, "She probably doesn't even know what she's doing in class. Let's see if anyone actually talks to her." A ripple of chuckles spread among nearby students, the kind of laughter that bites at the edges of self-confidence. Jasmine's mind, however, remained clear. She remembered her grandmother's words. "Strength isn't loud. It's the calm in the storm. It's how you rise when others try to push you down." The cafeteria with its cacophony of sound and subtle hostility was her storm. But within it, she could find clarity, patience, and a strategy that would allow her to rise above the petty cruelty. She ate her lunch slowly, methodically, every bite a reminder that she was in control of her own response. The bullies, however, were relentless. They whispered to surrounding students, ensuring the gossip spread, casting Jasmine as an outsider, a target, a novelty to be judged. Some students snickered quietly, others shook their heads in mild disapproval at the audacity of the bullies, but few intervened. The subtle social isolation was designed not to physically hurt Jasmine, but to undermine her confidence, to make her feel small in a room full of potential friends. Jasmine noticed small details, the way the sunlight bounced off the metallic surface of the tables, the way a stray napkin fluttered across the floor, the way the janitor moved quietly in the background. She absorbed it all not as distractions but as elements of her environment, cues for her strategic thinking. If the bullies wanted to wage a war of whispers, she could counter it with quiet competence and undeniable talent. And she would. The science fair was approaching, and there she would demonstrate not just her intelligence but her ability to turn ridicule into recognition. For now she endured the whispers, the stares, the subtle jabs. Each insult and sneer was fuel, not fire. Jasmine reminded herself that brilliance and integrity could not be undermined by gossip alone. The cafeteria's chatter, the bullies, snickers, the curious glances of other students, all of it would fade in, comparison to the evidence she would soon present through her work, her creativity, and her perseverance. As she finished her lunch, Jasmine made a mental note of the bullies' methods. Kayla relied on charm and confidence, Tiffany on subtle manipulation and fear. Both were predictable in their way because cruelty often is. Jasmine smiled faintly to herself. Understanding her adversaries was part of the strategy. The battle was far from over, but the first move, enduring their whispers without faltering, had already been won. The bell rang, cutting through the ambient noise of the lunchroom, signaling the end of the break. Students scrambled to gather belongings, pushing through crowds, voices rising in excitement and chatter. Jasmine carried her tray to the disposal area, her movements calm and deliberate while the bullies whispered among themselves, no doubt plotting the next phase of their social campaign. But Jasmine's mind was already elsewhere, on experiments on equations on the upcoming science fair, where her talent, strategy, and resilience would shine brighter than the whispers of cruelty could ever dim. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Cedarwood High's library, casting long golden beams across the rows of bookshelves. It was a sanctuary, a quiet retreat from the chaos of hallways and cafeterias, a place where ideas thrived and minds expanded. Jasmine Carter, clutching her science notebook and a few pencils, slipped into the library, seeking both refuge and inspiration. The hum of fluorescent lights above mingled with the faint rustling of pages, the soft whispers of students studying, and the occasional creak of a chair on the polished wooden floor. Today had been a trial of patience. The whispers in the hall, the pointed glances in the lunchroom, and the relentless snickering of Kayla and Tiffany had tested Jasmine's resolve. Yet she had endured her quiet intelligence, her shield, and her determination the sword. As she settled into a corner table by the window, she let her notebook fall open, revealing sketches, calculations, and ideas for the upcoming science fair. Her fingers traced the diagrams, her mind racing through possible experiments, variables, and outcomes. She was already envisioning a project that would not just impress, but leave an indelible mark. It was then, nestled among the scattered pencils and notes, that she noticed something unusual. A small folded note had been placed on her table. Its edges were slightly worn, as if it had traveled through several hands, or perhaps deliberately left for her. Jasmine's brow furrowed with curiosity. Who could have left it? She looked around the quiet library, but no one met her gaze. The librarian was absorbed in filing books, and the other students were buried in their studies. Her heartbeat quickened, a mixture of curiosity and cautious excitement. She unfolded the note carefully. The handwriting was neat, elegant, and unfamiliar. Do not let them break you. Your talent is evident, and your persistence will pay off. Trust yourself and your abilities. You are stronger than you know. Jasmine's eyes widened slightly. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a reassurance that cut through the tension of the day. It was as if someone had seen her struggles and recognized the quiet storm of resilience within her. A mysterious ally, a stranger yet somehow understanding, had offered her encouragement at precisely the moment she needed it most. For a moment Jasmine simply sat there, absorbing the words. The library's golden light seemed to intensify, highlighting the pages of her notebook and reflecting in her determined eyes. The note was more than just encouragement. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in a world eager to judge and ridicule, there were unseen forces that recognized merit, intelligence, and strength. She glanced up and down the rows of bookshelves, curiosity mingled with cautious skepticism. Who could it be? A teacher, perhaps? A senior student who had observed her in class? Or someone entirely unknown, simply moved by the quiet determination they had witnessed? The anonymity of the note only added to its intrigue. Jasmine's mind raced, considering possibilities, but she quickly refocused. The note's purpose was clear. She was to trust herself, and in doing so her path forward would become illuminated. With renewed vigor, Jasmine turned her attention back to her science notebook. Every diagram, every calculation, every hypothesis she had sketched now seemed imbued with a new sense of purpose. The bullies' whispers, the stares of skeptical peers, and the subtle social isolation she had endured throughout the day felt less intimidating. The note had transformed her perspective. Obstacles were not walls, but challenges to navigate with patience, strategy, and intelligence. She began sketching out a new experiment, one that would leverage her knowledge of renewable energy and physics in an innovative way. The project would be visually engaging, scientifically sound, and undeniably impressive. Jasmine's fingers moved quickly, annotating diagrams, calculating variables, and imagining the reactions of judges and peers alike. Each line she drew reinforced her determination. Each formula she wrote served as a small victory over the subtle cruelty that had sought to undermine her confidence. As the afternoon wore on, Jasmine allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The note was a reminder that she was not alone, that support could come from unexpected places, and that resilience often thrived in anonymity. She tucked the note carefully into her notebook, a talisman of encouragement, and continued working with renewed focus. The challenges of Cedarwood High, the bullies, the whispers, the social hurdles were no longer insurmountable. They were puzzles to solve, obstacles to overcome, and steps toward her ultimate triumph. By the time the library bell rang, signaling the end of the day, Jasmine had completed several pages of detailed plans for her science fair project. She packed her notebook, pencils, and materials with careful precision, a subtle smile tugging at her lips. She had discovered something powerful. Even in moments of uncertainty, there were unexpected allies, sources of hope, and glimpses of encouragement that could transform doubt into determination. Stepping out into the fading light of the afternoon, Jasmine felt a quiet confidence settle within her. The bullies would not see it coming, the skeptics would not anticipate it, and the world would soon witness the brilliance that had remained quietly simmering beneath the surface. The note was a reminder that her path, though challenging, was guided by intelligence, resilience, and the mysterious support of someone who recognized her potential. And Jasmine, with her notebook clutched tightly and her spirit strengthened, was ready to rise above every obstacle in her way. The next morning, Cedarwood High buzzed with heightened anticipation. Students moved through the hallways with an unusual energy, their chatter filled with speculation and excitement. Flyers had been posted everywhere on locker doors, classroom walls, and even the cafeteria bulletin board announcing the annual school science fair. Bright, colorful graphics depicted glowing light bulbs swirling, test tubes and schematics of rockets and experiments, each promising opportunities for creativity, innovation, and recognition. Jasmine Carter, moving through the familiar maze of lockers, paused to read one of the flyers. Her eyes lit up as she absorbed the details. The science fair would allow students to present individual or team projects judged not only on innovation, but also on scientific accuracy, presentation skills, and creative application. Prizes included scholarships, certificates, and the chance to have their projects featured in local media. For Jasmine, this was more than a competition. It was an arena where intelligence mattered more than popularity, where results spoke louder than whispers, and where brilliance could not be ignored. Kayla and Tiffany spotting. Jasmine, reading the flyer, exchanged mischievous glances. "Looks like the new girl is already thinking about winning," Kayla whispered, her smirk evident even at a distance. Tiffany chuckled softly. "She probably doesn't have a chance here. Let's see how long that confidence lasts." Jasmine, aware of their scrutiny, felt a flicker of irritation quickly tempered by resolve. They could doubt her all they wanted, but she knew her intellect, creativity, and persistence would guide her far beyond their shallow assessments. Her first class of the day, biology with Miss Hargrove, started with a discussion of environmental science, sustainability, and energy conservation. Jasmine's mind wandered subtly toward potential science fair projects, analyzing variables, considering feasibility, and envisioning visually engaging experiments. She sketched preliminary diagrams in her notebook, the ideas flowing like a river. Renewable energy devices, chemical reactions demonstrating sustainability principles, and innovative uses of materials commonly found in households. Every idea was rooted in both creativity and scientific accuracy, reflecting Jasmine's deep understanding of the subject and her desire to make a lasting impression. During the lecture, Ms. Hargrove emphasized the importance of curiosity, critical thinking, and originality. "Remember," she said, her tone encouraging, "the science fair is not just about following instructions. It's about exploration, asking questions no one has thought to ask, and finding solutions that inspire. Don't be afraid to challenge yourself." Jasmine's pencil flew across the page, capturing formulas, sketches, and observations, each annotation a step toward her future project. Her excitement was palpable, a quiet determination building within her, contrasting the subtle tension of knowing. Kayla and Tiffany would be watching her every move. At lunch, the whispers returned now, accompanied by hushed predictions. Kayla and Tiffany clustered with friends, debating Jasmine's potential. "Do you really think she can compete?" one student asked. Tiffany smirked. "She's new. It's cute how she thinks she stands a chance." Jasmine, walking to her table with her tray, heard fragments of the conversation, but refused to react. She knew their comments were designed to unsettle her, to make her second-guess her ideas and efforts. Instead, she focused on the task at hand, planning a project that would be innovative, scientifically sound, and impossible to ignore. After school, Jasmine returned to the library, her trusted sanctuary. She spread her notebook across the table, revisiting notes from previous classes, adding detailed calculations, diagrams, and hypotheses. The science fair now had a tangible deadline in her mind, transforming her quiet observations into a structured plan. Every step was meticulously considered: which materials to use, how to demonstrate the results effectively, and how to present her work in a way that would captivate both judges and peers alike. She paused, reflecting on the encouragement note she had received days earlier, the mysterious ally whose words had bolstered her confidence. The note had instilled a sense of hope and reinforced her belief that her efforts mattered. That quiet inspiration fueled her creativity, enabling her to think beyond ordinary projects and envision something extraordinary: a renewable energy model capable of demonstrating efficiency, sustainability, and real-world application, coupled with a visually engaging presentation. Even as the bullies continued their subtle surveillance in the hallways and whispers lingered in the background, Jasmine's focus was unwavering. She had learned that intelligence, resilience, and determination could not be diminished by doubt, gossip, or shallow mockery. The science fair represented not just a competition, but a stage for her talent, ingenuity, and perseverance to shine, proving that brilliance often comes quietly before it is recognized by the world. By the time she left the library, Jasmine had a comprehensive outline for her project, a list of required materials and a clear vision of how she would approach each stage. The sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the school grounds, and Jasmine felt a quiet thrill of anticipation. The science fair would be the proving ground, the arena where whispers of doubt would meet the undeniable force of her intellect, and she was ready. The sun had just begun to dip behind the tall oak trees surrounding Cedarwood High, casting long dappled shadows across the school grounds. Jasmine Carter carried her carefully packed materials into the science lab, eager to continue building the project she had meticulously planned for the upcoming science fair. Today, however, the air of excitement was tinged with an underlying tension, a subtle sense that challenges, both expected and unforeseen, were about to test her resilience. Jasmine set her materials on the lab table with deliberate care. Her experiment required precise measurements, sensitive instruments, and a methodical approach to ensure that every component worked flawlessly. She reviewed her notes one final time, double-checking calculations, formulas, and diagrams. Everything appeared to be in order. Confidence surged through her, a quiet but unyielding force that had carried her through weeks of whispers, sneers, and subtle social isolation. As she began assembling the first portion of her renewable energy demonstration, Jasmine noticed something unexpected. One of the components, a small motor she had carefully calibrated, was not responding as anticipated. She double-checked the connections, recalibrated the settings, and attempted to restart the system. A faint spark flickered, and then the motor stilled once more. Jasmine's brow furrowed, a flicker of concern crossing her otherwise composed face. She had prepared meticulously, yet here was an unforeseen obstacle threatening to derail her progress. Frustration pressed at the edges of her focus, but Jasmine forced herself to breathe deeply. "This is a test, not a failure," she reminded herself. "Every great discovery is built on trials, setbacks, and perseverance." She traced her steps, carefully examining each wire, each connection, each measurement. The motor, though functional in earlier trials, refused to cooperate under the new configuration required for her full demonstration. The laboratory was silent except for the faint hum of the ventilation system and the occasional clink of glassware from a distant bench. The subdued lighting cast soft shadows across the counters, highlighting Jasmine's concentrated expression. She felt the subtle pang of disappointment but refused to let it dominate her mindset. Challenges were a natural part of scientific inquiry, and each problem presented an opportunity to innovate, adapt, and overcome. As she brainstormed potential solutions, a quiet voice interrupted her thoughts. "Hey, do you want some help?" Jasmine looked up to see a fellow student, Michael Reynolds, standing nearby. He was a senior, tall, with short brown hair and an approachable demeanor, his eyes reflecting curiosity rather than judgment. Jasmine nodded slowly, welcoming the assistance without hesitation. Michael had noticed her dedication in class, and though they were not close friends, he respected her talent and perseverance. Together, they examined the motor and the surrounding apparatus. Michael suggested a few adjustments to the wiring and offered alternative configurations that Jasmine had not initially considered. "Sometimes it's not the calculations," he explained gently, "but the way the components interact under real conditions. Let's test a different approach." Jasmine appreciated the collaborative spirit, recognizing that even in moments of setback, support could emerge in unexpected ways. They implemented the adjustments cautiously. Jasmine's hands moved with precision, guided by both her prior planning and Michael's suggestions. Slowly, methodically, the motor responded, a small hum indicating that the system was operational once more. A wave of relief and quiet triumph washed over Jasmine. Though the obstacle had threatened to derail her progress, she had adapted, persevered, and emerged stronger. Yet as the motor began to operate smoothly, Jasmine's mind wandered briefly to Kayla and Tiffany. She imagined their smug expressions if they were able to see her stumble even momentarily. The thought sparked a quiet determination. Not only would she succeed despite obstacles, but she would do so in a way that was unmistakable, undeniable, and impossible to dismiss. Her setbacks were not failures. They were opportunities to refine her approach, to enhance her project, and to strengthen her resolve. By the time the afternoon light faded entirely, Jasmine had not only resolved the mechanical issue but also refined her experiment to improve efficiency and visual impact. The setback had become a stepping stone, a lesson in patience, adaptation, and ingenuity. She carefully documented each adjustment, noting the reasons behind her decisions and the outcomes of every test. Packing up her materials for the day, Jasmine reflected on the experience. The first real challenge to her science fair project had been more than a technical obstacle. It had been a test of character resilience and strategic thinking. And she had passed. Each setback, she realized, was not a signal to give up, but a chance to grow stronger, to prove to herself and eventually to the world that determination and intelligence could overcome even the most unexpected difficulties. As she left the laboratory, the evening sky painted in shades of gold and deep blue, Jasmine felt a renewed sense of purpose. The whispers of bullies, the casual judgments of peers, and the subtle doubts of others were powerless against her intellect, perseverance, and creativity. The science fair loomed closer, and with every obstacle overcome, Jasmine Carter moved one step closer to a triumph that would leave a lasting impression, a triumph that would be impossible to ignore. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Cedarwood High, casting long, gentle rays across the classroom. The air was filled with the low hum of students chatting before class backpacks shuffled across the floor, and the occasional scrape of a chair against the polished linoleum. Jasmine Carter entered the room carrying her notebook and materials for her science fair project, her mind still buzzing from yesterday's first setback. Her confidence had grown through perseverance, but the road ahead was daunting, and every challenge tested both her intellect and resilience. She found her usual seat near the front of the classroom, setting her notebook neatly on the desk. The science fair was on everyone's minds. The classroom had been abuzz with speculation about who would present the most innovative project. Jasmine had spent late nights refining her design, sketching precise diagrams, and calculating every possible variable. Her focus was unwavering, a quiet determination that had become her shield against ridicule, whispers, and doubt. Just as she began reviewing her notes, a soft voice interrupted her concentration. "Hey, Jasmine, that project of yours, it's really impressive." Jasmine looked up to see Daniel Thompson, a sophomore in her biology class, standing beside her desk. Daniel had always been quiet and observant, rarely speaking in large groups, but known among a small circle for his curiosity and analytical mind. His dark hair fell slightly over his forehead, and his eyes held a warm, genuine admiration. Jasmine blinked, surprised but pleased. "Thanks," she replied, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I'm still working out some of the kinks, but I'm confident it'll come together." Daniel nodded thoughtfully, stepping closer. "I've been watching you during lab sessions. You're methodical, precise, and you don't let setbacks stop you. That's rare." His encouragement was simple yet powerful. Jasmine felt a subtle warmth spread through her chest, a recognition of her efforts that extended beyond grades, whispers, or social perception. For the first time, someone her own age had acknowledged her dedication without bias or ulterior motive. The bell rang, signaling the start of class, but the moment lingered in Jasmine's mind. She and Daniel shared a few brief words about potential project enhancements and alternative experiments. He offered suggestions for materials she might not have considered, and strategies to optimize efficiency, all while respecting her original vision. Jasmine absorbed every word, her notebook quickly filling with annotations, calculations, and new insights. The collaboration, though brief, reignited her motivation and sharpened her focus. Meanwhile, Kayla and Tiffany sat in the back of the classroom, their whispers and glances unmistakable. They noticed Daniel's interaction with Jasmine, their expressions a mixture of irritation and disbelief. They had expected isolation and struggle, not subtle alliances forming quietly within the classroom. Their plan to undermine her confidence was becoming increasingly ineffective as Jasmine's calm determination and unexpected support strengthened her position. By mid-morning, Jasmine and Daniel had exchanged notes, discussing ways to enhance the experiment's accuracy and presentation. He offered encouragement not just for the technical aspects, but for her resilience, highlighting how setbacks were not failures, but opportunities to innovate and improve. "Don't let them get to you," Daniel said quietly, nodding toward the back where Kayla and Tiffany lingered. "Your work speaks louder than their whispers ever could." Jasmine felt a surge of gratitude. The acknowledgement from someone her own age, someone who had observed her quietly and offered sincere guidance, reinforced her sense of purpose. She realized that strength was not always a solitary pursuit. It could be amplified by allies who recognized talent, effort, and character. Even amidst whispers, judgment, and subtle ridicule, genuine support could appear in the most unexpected moments. After class, Jasmine returned to the library to continue her preparations. She reviewed the notes Daniel had provided, integrating new calculations and refining the experimental design. Each adjustment brought her closer to her vision of a project that would not only demonstrate scientific understanding, but also captivate and inspire her peers and the judges. She imagined the moment she would present her results, the reactions of those who had doubted her, and the quiet satisfaction of having persevered with intelligence, creativity, and resilience. By the time school ended, Jasmine had made significant progress. Her notebook was filled with diagrams, calculations, and detailed observations. She had overcome yesterday's setback, integrated Daniel's guidance, and further strengthened her resolve. The road to the science fair was becoming less intimidating and more exciting a stage for her talent, strategy, and determination to shine. As she left the library, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow over the campus, Jasmine felt a renewed sense of confidence. The bullies' whispers, the casual judgments, and the subtle social challenges were no longer barriers. They were merely background noise against the clarity of her purpose. With her skills, intelligence, and unexpected support from allies like Daniel, Jasmine Carter was poised to transform doubt into recognition, whispers into admiration, and setbacks into triumph. The hallways of Cedarwood High were unusually loud that morning, a cacophony of locker slams, hurried footsteps, and the constant hum of teenage chatter. Jasmine Carter walked with quiet confidence, her notebook clutched securely in her arms. The whispers of bullies, though ever present, no longer unsettled her. Her recent victories in focused collaboration with Daniel and overcoming technical setbacks had fortified her resolve. She had become an unseen force, moving steadily toward the science fair with precision, creativity, and determination. But the bullies, Kayla and Tiffany, were far from defeated. Observing Jasmine's growing poise and recognition, they began to escalate their efforts. Their tactics evolved from subtle whispers to strategic social attacks designed to isolate her further and undermine her confidence. They whispered loudly enough for others to overhear, rolled their eyes when she passed, and even planted false rumors about her abilities and intentions. Every glance, every smirk was calculated to provoke a reaction, to disrupt her mental equilibrium, and to assert their dominance. In the cafeteria, Kayla leaned toward Tiffany, her voice sharp yet controlled. "She thinks she's untouchable now, huh?" Kayla whispered, her eyes following Jasmine across the room. Tiffany smirked. "Confidence doesn't last forever. Let's see how she handles a real challenge." Their plotting was subtle but deliberate, designed to ensure that Jasmine remained aware of their presence, a constant reminder of opposition she could not entirely escape. Jasmine entered the cafeteria carrying her tray with calm precision. She chose a seat away from the crowd near the window where sunlight streamed in, highlighting her quiet determination. Her eyes scanned the room, noting the subtle glances and whispered conversations, but she did not flinch. Her mind was focused on the upcoming science fair, on her project, and on the steps she would take to ensure her work spoke louder than the whispers. Kayla and Tiffany, noticing Jasmine's awareness and composure, intensified their efforts. They orchestrated a minor disruption by nudging a lunch tray near Jasmine, spilling a small amount of juice toward her table. The cafeteria gasped subtly, students leaning forward to witness the unfolding drama. Jasmine froze for a moment, assessing the situation with calm precision. Rather than reacting with anger or embarrassment, she reached for a paper towel, carefully cleaning the spill while maintaining her composure. Every student present observed her poise, her ability to handle a provocation without losing control. The subtle shift in perception was noticeable. Some students who had once whispered along with the bullies now watched silently, their curiosity piqued by Jasmine's calm response. Even Daniel, who had observed from across the room, offered a small nod of encouragement. Jasmine realized that her quiet strength, intelligence, and resilience were gradually undermining the bullies' efforts. Their carefully orchestrated campaign of intimidation was losing its efficacy. Despite this, the tension continued to mount. In the hallway after lunch, Kayla and Tiffany confronted Jasmine more directly. Tiffany's voice was sharp, almost theatrical in its venom. "You think you're going to win that science fair?" she asked, her smirk widening. "Everyone knows you're just a beginner. Maybe you should stick to something easier." Jasmine looked up calmly, her eyes steady and unwavering. "I'll let my work speak for itself," she replied, her tone neutral but firm. There was no anger, no hesitation, only confidence rooted in preparation, talent, and resilience. Kayla and Tiffany's irritation grew. They had anticipated fear, hesitation, or anger reactions they could exploit. Instead, they encountered calm determination. Jasmine's ability to navigate their provocations without faltering frustrated them, intensifying their efforts even further. They continued to whisper behind her back, orchestrating minor distractions and spreading rumors about her competence. Yet every attempt was met with subtle resistance. Jasmine's focus, intelligence, and growing network of support made their attacks increasingly ineffective. By mid-afternoon, the tension had reached a subtle crescendo. Jasmine retreated to her usual corner in the library to work on her project, reviewing calculations, refining diagrams, and imagining the presentation she would deliver at the science fair. Kayla and Tiffany's whispers echoed faintly in the background, but Jasmine's attention was unwavering. She understood that confrontation alone would not resolve the conflict. Patience, strategic thinking, and consistent excellence were her most powerful tools. The rivalry had intensified, creating a subtle but persistent tension that now underpinned Jasmine's daily routine. Every encounter, every whispered remark, every deliberate nudge or misdirection by the bullies was an opportunity for her to demonstrate resilience, intelligence, and calm composure. The science fair became more than a competition. It was a proving ground, a stage on which Jasmine's abilities would be unmistakably visible, leaving no room for doubt or dismissal. As the school day ended, Jasmine packed her notebook, carefully reflecting on the day's interactions. The rivalry with Kayla and Tiffany, though persistent, had inadvertently strengthened her resolve. Each provocation, each whispered insult became fuel for her determination. The bullies' attempts to undermine her confidence were increasingly ineffective because Jasmine's focus was rooted not in fear or revenge, but in preparation, creativity, and excellence. Walking home through the late afternoon, light Jasmine felt a sense of quiet anticipation. The challenges were far from over, and the bullies' presence remained a constant. Yet, with every obstacle navigated, every calculated provocation handled with composure, she moved closer to her ultimate goal. The whispers, smirks, and subtle attacks of Kayla and Tiffany could not match the power of persistence, talent, and quiet resilience. Jasmine Carter was poised to rise above every challenge, and when the science fair arrived, the world would witness the results of her unwavering determination. The late afternoon sun slanted through the tall library windows, bathing the study tables in warm golden light. Jasmine Carter sat at her usual corner table, her science notebook open, pages filled with diagrams, calculations, and notes from previous experiments. Despite the bullies' relentless whispers and the tension that had built over the past few days, she remained focused. Each challenge she faced had sharpened her mind, strengthened her resolve, and clarified her vision for the upcoming science fair. Her recent collaboration with Daniel and her meticulous adjustments to her experiment after the first setback had made the project more refined. Still, Jasmine sensed something was missing. The initial design worked, but it lacked the wow factor, the element that would capture attention and demonstrate not only scientific understanding, but ingenuity. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her pencil thoughtfully against the edge of the notebook, scanning the diagrams she had drawn, reviewing every calculation and observation with painstaking precision. Then, as the golden light caught her attention, she noticed the way shadows from the window panes fell across her table. It sparked an idea, one she hadn't considered before. What if the energy conversion process could be demonstrated visually in a way that was both accurate and striking? The thought ignited a surge of excitement and determination. Her mind raced, analyzing possibilities, testing hypotheses, mentally and envisioning a method that would elevate her project from functional to extraordinary. Jasmine began sketching furiously, combining elements from her original renewable energy concept with a dynamic visual representation. She considered materials that could reflect light, move in response to energy output, and illustrate principles of efficiency and sustainability in a tangible, captivating way. Every pencil stroke, every annotation, every calculation was deliberate, aimed at transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. Hours passed unnoticed. The library had emptied the golden sunlight, replaced by the soft glow of overhead lights. Jasmine's focus never wavered. She iterated her design multiple times, correcting minor flaws, enhancing the visual impact, and ensuring scientific accuracy. The breakthrough idea had given her not only a technical advantage, but a renewed sense of confidence. She knew that this innovation would distinguish her project from all others, proving that creativity and resilience were as important as technical skill. She paused to reflect, recalling the bullies' whispered doubts, the subtle sabotage attempts, and their expectation that she would falter. Instead of discouragement, those actions fueled her determination. Jasmine realized that each obstacle had contributed to the refinement of her idea. Her perseverance combined with careful observation and collaboration with allies. Like Daniel had transformed challenges into stepping stones for brilliance. To test her breakthrough idea, Jasmine retrieved the components and assembled a small prototype on the library table. The motor wires and reflective materials interacted exactly as she envisioned. When she activated the system, light patterns danced across the table, responding to energy output in a visually striking demonstration. The result was both scientifically accurate and aesthetically impressive, a tangible representation of energy, conversion, and efficiency that would immediately capture attention. Jasmine leaned back, a quiet smile of satisfaction spreading across her face. She had taken her project beyond simple functionality and created a display that combined science, creativity, and visual storytelling. The breakthrough idea was not just an improvement, it was a revelation, one that would make her project unforgettable. Her thoughts turned to the upcoming science fair. The judges' peers, and even the bullies themselves would witness the result of her persistence, ingenuity, and quiet determination. Jasmine understood that the breakthrough idea was more than a technical enhancement. It was a statement. It symbolized her ability to rise above adversity, turn setbacks into opportunities, and transform whispers of doubt into undeniable proof of her talent. Becking her prototype and notes carefully, Jasmine felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The breakthrough had shifted her perspective, strengthened her confidence, and reinforced the idea that resilience, focus, and creativity could overcome even the most persistent challenges. As she left the library, the evening sky glowing with shades of orange and purple, she knew that the path to the science fair was clearer than ever. Every step, every adjustment, and every moment of perseverance had led to this point, a moment of true innovation ready to be showcased for the world to see. The day after Jasmine's breakthrough, the halls of Cedarwood High seemed unusually charged with tension. News of the science fair had spread quickly, and whispers of excitement and speculation filled the corridors. Yet for Jasmine Carter, the sensation of accomplishment was tempered by the knowledge that not everyone would celebrate her success. The bullies, Kayla Thompson and Tiffany Evans, were watching closely, their eyes sharp, their expressions tight with envy. Kayla, in particular, felt a surge of jealousy she could barely contain. Jasmine's project, already far ahead in design, had transformed in complexity and visual impact overnight. The breakthrough idea, the elegant demonstration of energy conversion, and the careful calculations made her project not just impressive, but impossible to ignore. Kayla's attempts to undermine her whispers, minor pranks, and subtle intimidation had failed repeatedly. Now desperation crept into her thoughts. She had underestimated the quiet strength, intelligence, and resilience of the new girl, and that realization fueled a simmering anger. In the cafeteria, Kayla and Tiffany huddled with a few friends, their voices low but charged with frustration. "She's unstoppable." Kayla hissed, her hand tightening around the edge of the table. "I thought maybe we could make her falter, but she's perfect, and it's infuriating." Tiffany nodded, frustration evident on her face. "She's not just smart, she's confident, calm, and creative. How do we even compete with that?" Their discussion revealed a mix of admiration and resentment, a dangerous combination that often led to impulsive, reckless actions. Across the cafeteria, Jasmine carried her tray with calm precision, her focus entirely on her project notes. She had noticed the intensified gazes from Kayla and Tiffany, but did not flinch. Their envy, she realized, was a reflection of her own strength and progress. She had turned every setback into a stepping stone and every whisper into motivation. Yet she was aware that their jealousy might manifest as direct action, and she needed to be prepared. Later that day in the science lab, Jasmine continued refining her prototype. The motor hummed smoothly. Reflective materials demonstrated energy conversion with precision, and diagrams illustrated the project's underlying principles. Her confidence surged as she documented every detail, preparing for the upcoming fair. However, she could not ignore the faint sense of impending tension, the knowledge that Kayla's jealousy might escalate into sabotage or confrontation. Indeed, by mid-afternoon, the first signs appeared. Kayla approached Jasmine under the guise of casual conversation, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. "Hey, Jasmine, your project looks interesting," she said, her tone laced with subtle condescension. Tiffany lingered nearby, arms crossed, ready to reinforce the act. Jasmine's eyes met Kayla's, steady and calm. "Thank you," she replied, her tone polite but firm. I'm excited about the science fair." Kayla's frustration grew as she realized that Jasmine was unfazed by the thinly veiled attempt to intimidate her. After class, Kayla confided in Tiffany, her voice low and urgent. "We need to do something," she whispered. "We can't let her win. We need, a plan. She's too far ahead and everyone is going to notice. If we don't act, she's going to humiliate us by winning." Tiffany's eyes widened slightly. "Are you suggesting we sabotage her?" Kayla's lips tightened into a thin line. Maybe just a little push in the right direction. Something subtle enough that she won't suspect at first, but impactful enough to slow her down. Jasmine, meanwhile, remained focused on her project. She was aware of the mounting jealousy, the whispers, and the subtle attempts at distraction, but she refused to let them affect her composure. Every adjustment she made to her prototype, every note she wrote, reinforced her commitment to excellence. Her strength was not in confrontation, but in preparation, intelligence, and strategic resilience. She understood that the bully's envy was an external challenge, a test of her ability to maintain focus and integrity in the face of opposition. By the evening, Jasmine packed her materials and reflected on the day's developments. The jealousy from Kayla had peaked, creating a heightened sense of tension, but Jasmine felt an inner calm. She recognized that envy, intimidation, and attempts at sabotage could only succeed if she allowed them to. Her preparation, creativity, and persistence had reached a point where nothing short of blatant interference could disrupt her progress, and even then she was ready to adapt, overcome, and persevere. Walking home as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the school grounds, Jasmine felt a sense of quiet determination. The bully's jealousy, though intense, could not match her focus, talent, and ingenuity. Every day brought new challenges, but each obstacle only strengthened her resolve. When the science fair finally arrived, she knew her project would not only impress, but leave an indelible mark, a testament to resilience, intelligence, and the power of turning adversity into triumph. The days leading up to the Cedarwood High Science Fair were a whirlwind of preparation, anticipation, and relentless focus. For Jasmine Carter, every moment was a deliberate step toward perfection. She arrived early each morning and lingered late into the afternoon, meticulously reviewing calculations, diagrams, and notes. Her breakthrough idea, an elegant, visually striking demonstration of renewable energy conversion, was her centerpiece. But she understood that excellence was in the details. Every wire, every reflective material, every motor calibration mattered. The school lab had become her sanctuary. Jasmine spread her prototype across the table, organized tools and components methodically, and ensured that every aspect of the experiment was ready for flawless execution. Each adjustment was recorded in her notebook, every minor tweak analyzed for scientific accuracy and visual impact. The hum of motors, the faint clinks of tools, and the subtle whir of fans created a rhythmic background as she worked tirelessly. Daniel, recognizing her dedication, stopped by one afternoon to offer support. He observed silently for a moment, impressed by Jasmine's methodical approach, and then suggested a minor enhancement to the visual demonstration. "If you angle the mirrors slightly differently," he said, pointing to a reflective surface, "the light patterns will be more dynamic and visually appealing without affecting efficiency." Jasmine smiled, grateful for the insight. Every piece of advice, every collaboration had strengthened her project and boosted her confidence. Despite the growing pressure and the bullies' continued whispers, Jasmine's focus never wavered. Kayla and Tiffany had attempted subtle disruptions, leaving notes, asking seemingly innocent questions, and casting disparaging glances. Yet Jasmine treated each provocation as an opportunity to reinforce her composure, demonstrating calm and confidence that no whisper or smirk could shake. Every challenge had become a lesson in patience, resilience, and strategic thinking. Her project now began to take its final form. The motor ran smoothly. Reflective surfaces cast intricate light patterns, and annotations clearly explained the principles behind energy conversion and efficiency. Jasmine visualized how it would appear to the judges. A precise combination of scientific accuracy, creativity, and visual storytelling. The experiment was not only functional, but captivating, a true representation of ingenuity, preparation, and hard work. To ensure perfection, Jasmine rehearsed her explanation multiple times. She spoke aloud, articulating the scientific principles, the purpose of each component, and the significance of her breakthrough idea. The practice sessions helped refine her delivery, ensuring clarity, confidence, and the ability to captivate an audience. Each iteration polished both the project and Jasmine's presentation skills, building a quiet but undeniable presence that would leave a lasting impression. As the final adjustments were made, Jasmine took a step back and observed her work with a critical eye. Every wire, every reflective surface, and every annotation had been scrutinized and optimized. Her preparation was meticulous, her focus unwavering, and her vision clear. The project was ready for the science fair, an embodiment of her creativity, intelligence, and resilience in the face of adversity. Evening descended on Cedarwood High, casting long shadows across the campus. Jasmine carefully packed her materials, ensuring each component was secure and organized. She reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The initial mockery from bullies, the first setback, the unexpected support from allies like Daniel, and the breakthroughs that transformed her project into something extraordinary. Each step had reinforced her understanding that perseverance, focus, and integrity were far more powerful than whispers, jealousy, or intimidation. Walking home under the soft glow of streetlights, Jasmine felt a quiet satisfaction. The project was polished, the presentation rehearsed, and the science fair imminent. She knew that when the day arrived, her work would speak for itself, demonstrating brilliance, creativity, and the triumph of resilience over adversity. The bullies' attempts to intimidate or undermine her were no longer obstacles, they were background noise against the clarity of purpose and excellence that defined Jasmine Carter. The morning of the Cedarwood High Science fair dawned bright and clear sunlight streaming through the tall windows of the school auditorium, illuminating rows of tables laden with colorful projects, intricate models, and carefully crafted displays. Jasmine Carter arrived early, carrying her meticulously organized materials, her heart beating with a mix of excitement, nervous anticipation, and quiet confidence. This was the culmination of weeks of perseverance, setbacks, collaboration, and breakthroughs, a stage where her brilliance would be unmistakably visible. The auditorium buzzed with students, teachers, and curious spectators. Projects ranged from simple mechanical demonstrations to complex robotics, but Jasmine's stood out immediately for its sleek design, dynamic light display, and precision-engineered motor. She carefully unpacked her prototype, arranging reflective materials, verifying motor connections, and positioning her notes for clarity and visual appeal. Every detail had been meticulously polished, ensuring that her presentation would convey both scientific accuracy and creativity. Kayla and Tiffany arrived shortly after, their eyes scanning the room for Jasmine. Their expressions were a mixture of jealousy, irritation, and disbelief. Jasmine noticed them from across the room but remained unfazed. Their attempts to intimidate her had failed repeatedly, and she understood that their presence was now merely background noise against the clarity of her purpose and preparation. The judges made their rounds. Jasmine greeted them politely, demonstrating confidence, composure, and professional poise. Her presentation began with a clear explanation of the principles of renewable energy conversion, followed by a demonstration of the prototype. The reflective materials caught the light, creating intricate patterns that visually represented energy flow. The motor ran smoothly, executing the demonstration with precision, and the audience responded with audible interest and admiration. Daniel, who had arrived early to observe, watched silently. From the side, pride evident in his expression. He knew the hours of dedication, collaboration, and refinement that had brought Jasmine to this moment. The project was more than a model. It was a testament to resilience, intelligence, and creativity. Every challenge, every whispered insult, and every minor setback had contributed to the final polished display that now captivated everyone present. Kayla and Tiffany, observing Jasmine's performance, felt a mixture of envy and disbelief. They had expected hesitation, mistakes, or at least some visible anxiety, but instead they saw calm precision, articulate explanations, and a visually stunning demonstration. Their earlier confidence in undermining her had evaporated, replaced by a dawning realization that Jasmine's preparation, talent, and perseverance were unmatched. As Jasmine continued her presentation, she emphasized the significance of her breakthrough idea, how a small adjustment in reflective angles and energy flow could enhance both efficiency and visual understanding. The judges leaned in, nodding appreciatively, and students murmured among themselves, impressed by the clarity and ingenuity of her work. The subtle interplay of light, motion, and precise explanation elevated the project beyond mere functionality. It became a story, a visual and intellectual narrative that held the audience's attention and admiration. Throughout the event, Jasmine maintained her focus. Questions from judges were answered with calm confidence, demonstrating not only knowledge, but the ability to think on her feet. Every interaction reinforced her credibility and showcased the depth of her understanding. Meanwhile, Kayla and Tiffany's whispers and glances became increasingly futile, their jealousy now tinged with frustration as they realized Jasmine's dominance in both creativity and presentation. Mid-morning, Jasmine had completed her demonstration, carefully disassembling her prototype and documenting observations for the judge's review. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her preparation had allowed her to present flawlessly. The culmination of weeks of persistence, ingenuity, and resilience had reached a tangible, undeniable outcome. She glanced toward Daniel, who offered a subtle nod of approval, acknowledging the excellence she had achieved. The science fair continued with other presentations, but Jasmine's project remained a focal point. Students paused to observe, teachers praised her clarity and precision, and judges took meticulous notes. Every detail, from the carefully calibrated motor to the dynamic reflective surfaces, demonstrated the culmination of dedication, creativity, and strategic problem-solving. The event was no longer just a competition. It was a stage where Jasmine's brilliance shone unmistakably, commanding attention and admiration. As the morning drew to a close, Jasmine reflected on her journey. From the initial mockery by bullies to the first setbacks, from unexpected support to breakthrough innovation, every moment had contributed to this defining experience. The science fair was more than a contest. It was a demonstration of resilience, intelligence, and the power of persistence in the face of adversity. Jasmine knew that when the results were announced, the triumph would be not just in winning, but in having navigated every challenge with integrity, creativity, and unwavering focus. The buzzing excitement of the Cedarwood High Science Fair gradually subsided as the morning presentations concluded. Students lingered in clusters, discussing projects with curiosity, while judges retreated to a corner of the auditorium to deliberate. The room, once filled with vibrant activity, now held a quiet tension, a mixture of anticipation, nervous energy, and the suspenseful expectation of results. Jasmine Carter, having completed her presentation, flawlessly stepped aside near a large window, sunlight illuminating her calm, confident demeanor. She had meticulously prepared, refined every detail of her project, and demonstrated both precision and creativity. Yet despite her composure, the moments of waiting were electric with uncertainty. Every glance at the judges' group, every whispered discussion, reminded her that the outcome still lay in their hands. Kayla and Tiffany, standing nearby, fidgeted and whispered among themselves. Their jealousy had reached a fever pitch. They had expected to see Jasmine falter, to capitalize on mistakes, or to finally assert dominance, but every expectation had been shattered. The project was not only technically precise, but visually captivating, and Jasmine's presentation had conveyed confidence, intelligence, and clarity. The realization that her work was far beyond theirs had left them visibly shaken. The judges huddled around a small table, notebooks open, pens moving rapidly as they compared observations, scored projects, and debated relative strengths. One judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and an analytical expression, noted Jasmine's project. "The integration of visual demonstration with energy principles is exceptional," she said quietly, pointing to diagrams and notes. Another judge nodded in agreement. Her explanation was articulate, precise, and compelling. The attention to detail and overall presentation set her apart from the other students. Jasmine, observing the group from a distance, felt a mixture of anticipation and quiet reassurance. Every aspect of her preparation, the prototype, the calculations, the visual demonstration, the rehearsed explanation, had contributed to this moment. She knew that judges evaluated not only technical accuracy but creativity, clarity, and the ability to communicate effectively. Her project met all criteria, and her presentation had highlighted these qualities flawlessly. Meanwhile, whispers of admiration spread through the student audience. Teachers and peers discussed Jasmine's ingenuity, noting how the light patterns and motor interactions demonstrated scientific principles in a clear and engaging way. Some students speculated aloud about her project's potential, to win their curiosity and excitement, amplifying the tension in the auditorium. Kayla, sensing the growing recognition, attempted one final intimidation tactic, a pointed whisper aimed at Jasmine. "They'll see you're not that special," she muttered under her breath. Jasmine, focused and composed, ignored the remark entirely. Her attention remained on the judges and her project, her calm demeanor signaling both confidence and maturity beyond her years. The whispers had no power over her. Preparation, focus, and resilience had fortified her against every attempt at disruption. The judges' deliberation continued for several tense minutes. They discussed innovation presentation, clarity, scientific accuracy, and visual impact. Each judge highlighted Jasmine's work as exceptional, citing the seamless integration of theory, practice, and aesthetic appeal. They noted her ability to handle questions intelligently, her confidence under scrutiny, and the originality of her approach. Every aspect of the evaluation reinforced the likelihood that her project would receive top honors. As the deliberation drew to a close, the head judge stood and prepared to announce the results. A hush fell over the auditorium, a collective pause as students and spectators held their breath. Jasmine took a deep breath, standing tall, her hands clasped calmly in front of her. She reflected briefly on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The initial mockery, the first setback, the unexpected support from Daniel, the breakthrough idea, and the meticulous project polishing. Every step had been a test of resilience, intelligence, and persistence. The head judge cleared her throat, her voice steady but imbued with a sense of gravity. After careful evaluation, we are ready to announce the winners of the Cedarwood High Science Fair. This year we had many exceptional projects, but one stood out for its ingenuity, precision, and presentation. The first place winner is... The pause was deliberate, suspenseful, stretching across the auditorium. Every student leaned forward, the tension palpable. Every whisper and foot shuffle amplifying the anticipation. Jasmine felt her pulse quicken, though her expression remained composed. She met Daniel's eyes, who offered an encouraging nod. Her classmates watched, some with curiosity, some with disbelief, and even Kayla and Tiffany's eyes widened in shock and unguarded envy. The announcement would soon confirm what everyone had quietly sensed. Jasmine's brilliance, preparation, and perseverance had earned her the recognition she deserved. The head judge continued, "First place goes to Jasmine Carter for her project on renewable energy. Conversion demonstrating both scientific excellence and innovative visual representation." The auditorium erupted in applause, a mixture of admiration, excitement, and acknowledgement of her extraordinary effort. Jasmine's calm smile widened as she stepped forward to accept her award, the culmination of weeks of determination and focus now validated in the most public, undeniable way. Kayla and Tiffany, standing to the side, were frozen in disbelief. The mockery and jealousy that had driven their attempts to undermine Jasmine were now impotent, replaced by the stark reality of her success. Jasmine's triumph was not only a reflection of talent, but of perseverance, preparation, and resilience, a lesson made evident to everyone in the auditorium. Jasmine accepted her award with poise, thanked the judges politely, and allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. The culmination of her journey from the whispers of Bullies to the breakthrough idea, meticulous preparation, and flawless presentation had resulted in undeniable success. Every challenge had been met with intelligence, focus, and determination, proving that resilience and excellence could overcome adversity, intimidation, and envy. The applause in the Cedarwood High auditorium was deafening, a wave of admiration, excitement, and acknowledgement that washed over Jasmine Carter as she stepped forward to accept her award. Her heart swelled with a quiet pride, not just for the recognition but for the journey that had brought her to this moment. Weeks of preparation, resilience, creativity, and perseverance had culminated in undeniable triumph. Every whispered insult, every attempt at intimidation, every obstacle the bullies had thrown in her path had been transformed into fuel for her success. Elia and Tiffany, standing at the back of the auditorium, were frozen in disbelief. Their attempts to mock, intimidate, and undermine Jasmine had failed completely. The mockery they had once wielded like a weapon had turned impotent in the face of her composure, intelligence, and unwavering focus. Jealousy and frustration etched into their expressions. They watched as Jasmine accepted her first-place award, the weight of their misjudgment heavy on their shoulders. Daniel, standing beside her after the presentation, offered a wide smile of pride and congratulations. "You did it, Jasmine," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "All your hard work, your ideas, it paid off." Jasmine returned his smile, her calm poise intact. "It wasn't just me," she replied softly. "I had support, and every challenge taught me something. I'm grateful for all of it." Her eyes swept across the room, taking in the proud faces of teachers, peers, and fellow competitors. This recognition was not only personal, it was proof of what perseverance, intelligence, and resilience could achieve. As the crowd continued to applaud Jasmine, noticed subtle gestures of respect from students who had once observed her with indifference or curiosity. The admiration was quiet but sincere, a recognition of talent, courage, and unwavering dedication. Even some teachers approached, offering kind words and affirmations of her innovation and presentation skills. Every compliment, every nod of approval reinforced the lesson she had learned. Through adversity, excellence and determination could outshine envy and intimidation. Kayla, unable to contain her frustration, whispered to Tiffany, "I can't believe it, she actually won. How?" Tiffany shook her head, her expression a mixture of shock and reluctant admiration. "We underestimated her. All our plans, all our attempts, useless." The realization dawned that Jasmine's success was not luck, but the product of preparation, resilience, and creativity. They had mocked, intimidated, and doubted her, yet she had turned every obstacle into an opportunity for growth and triumph. After the formalities concluded, Jasmine returned to her table, carefully packing her prototype and notes. Students approached, curious and excited, asking questions about her process, her project, and the breakthrough idea that had made it exceptional. Jasmine answered each question thoughtfully, her demeanor patient, confident, and inspiring. The bullies' attempts at disruption had failed not only because of her intelligence, but because she had maintained integrity, focus, and humility throughout the journey. The victory was transformative not only in recognition, but in the emotional resonance it carried. Jasmine's journey had begun with mockery and subtle sabotage, yet she had risen above each challenge, demonstrating that perseverance, intelligence, and creativity could triumph over negativity. Her story resonated deeply, a life-changing example of courage and determination that inspired her peers and left a lasting impression on everyone present. As the day drew to a close, Jasmine walked home. Under a soft golden sunset, the warmth of the evening, reflecting the fulfillment of her achievement. She reflected on the journey, the initial ridicule, the supportive moments with allies like Daniel, the breakthrough idea that changed everything, and the meticulous effort that polished her project to perfection. Every moment had led to this defining victory, a testament to resilience and ingenuity. For Kayla and Tiffany, the moment was a bitter lesson. The bullies who had once mocked and intimidated her now faced the undeniable reality of Jasmine's talent and perseverance. Their regret was palpable, a subtle but powerful acknowledgement that mockery and envy could never outweigh preparation, focus, and integrity. Jasmine's triumph was not just a victory in a competition. It was an emotional, inspirational story that carried a powerful message. Adversity, jealousy, and intimidation are obstacles to be met with intelligence, creativity, and resilience. Every challenge faced with determination and focus can become a stepping stone toward success, and every act of perseverance can transform hardship into life-changing achievement. As Jasmine reached her front gate, she paused to look back at the school in the distance, a calm smile on her face. The journey had been long, the challenges many, but the lesson clear. Excellence, determination, and integrity could overcome even the most persistent obstacles. The bullies had mocked, but she had prevailed. And in that triumph, Jasmine Carter's story became more than a victory. It became an inspiration, a testament to hope, resilience, and the transformative power of believing in oneself. The evening sky glowed, with shades of amber and violet reflecting the culmination of her journey and the promise of new opportunities ahead. Jasmine's heart felt light, her mind clear, and her spirit elevated. The science fair had been more than a competition, it had been a life-changing experience, proving that courage, perseverance, and brilliance could turn even the harshest mockery into a celebrated triumph.